Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Welcome to the show today. I am so excited to be joined by my dear friend, Andrew Stoute. Andrew is the host of an incredible podcast I just love. It's an HR podcast called Let's Be Diverse. If you haven't given it a listen, you've got to check it out. Andrew's having some amazing conversations, really hot button items that are happening in the workplace, and he doesn't hold back from talking about and addressing those with his guests. So, welcome to the show, Andrew. It is such a pleasure to be on this side,
Mm.
actually interviewing you. The last time we did this, you interviewed me. So, are you feeling like nervous? Are you sweating? Are you ready?
No, actually, it's funny that you say that because I was a guest on a podcast last week, and
Uh-huh.
I did tell the host that it was kind of strange for me to be on the other end,
Yeah.
not knowing what was coming, being in
Mhm.
control of everything. So it's a little bit different for me. But yeah, I won't lie, it's a little bit fun. So I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. I'll never forget Andrew and I met through LinkedIn. Last
Mhm,
summer was when
mhm,
we met. I'll never
mhm.
forget our first conversation, and it's been such a nice friendship. So I'm
Yep.
so excited to have this conversation. We are talking today all about reputation, which I
Mm,
think when I asked you which topic you wanted to talk on, I when and you told me reputation building, I thought, ooh, I
mm,
like that.
mm.
It's cool.
Right.
So I'm excited to talk about reputation, how you can cultivate a strong reputation, and it's going to be fun. So
Mhm, mhm.
let's talk about it. What does reputation mean to you, Andrew? When you think of what does it mean? Let's start there.
So reputation to me, quite simply, it's I think someone who is when you have a good reputation means that you're ethical. You
Mhm.
have a lot of trust and respect from many individuals. You have the ability to fix you're not afraid to fix your mistakes.
Mm,
Um, you know the importance, not avoiding, the importance of not having or not being afraid to have difficult conversations, I would say.
ooh,
um,
that's good. Yeah.
because I feel like you're in that situation. You have to know when to have those conversations and when not to. And I feel like it allows people to truly believe in your word. So when you say something, that they absolutely know that you mean it. And it serves the interest of everyone involved, is was what I feel.
Ooh, it serves the interest of everyone involved. It's it's not just selfless because it including yourself, right? Like it's in everyone's interest, including your own. That's a
Right.
really interesting point.
Hmm.
I really like that. And you talked a lot about holding to your word, like integrity is a really core part of building a strong reputation.
Hmm.
Why do you think it's so important for us as employees and leaders to be thinking about building our reputation and what we can do to be cultivating a strong, solid reputation?
Well, I mean, when I think about this, I talk a lot about this, and especially a lot lately. I find that reputation, or if you want to say rapport building, I feel like a lot of businesses are they don't focus on it enough. I think
Okay.
so. Yes, you want to make money. You want to put food on the table. You gotta pay your bills. You're in it to make money. Absolutely. But I feel without reputation building, it goes hand in hand for me. So when you
Mm,
build reputation, so a leader, I'm going to date myself back here, but when I was about 16, 17 years old, I had a leader who told me, when if you have people who uh, trust you and believe in you, they're or they feel that you're genuine, they're willing to work with you, or they're going to be willing to buy from you. So I
mhm,
feel that when you are like that, people will see the side in you and they feel like they can trust you and they're willing to
mm,
continuously work from you. So, I mean, think about it this way. So if you call your regular restaurant or you call your regular company and you have somebody specific that really gave you really good customer service, you're likely to ask what their name is. And
Mhm.
when they say, "Oh, my name is Sally," then the next time you have to call that place, where you're gonna probably call Sally because she's built that reputation with you. She's built
A
that trust with
rapport.
you. She built that rapport. So right away, you're gonna wanna work. You're gonna wanna see them, right? You're gonna want to speak to them. When you go to
Mhm.
that restaurant, you're gonna want to get served by that waiter or waitress that gave you great service the last time. Back in the day when I was going to the bars, I'd want to go to the bar that took care of me the best. So you just remember these relationships that you build. So I think that's my long-winded answer. I think that's probably what it means, why
Mm.
it's so important.
Yeah, it's cultivating those relationships, and that first I like what you said there, that first exchange that you have with someone is such an important seed that's being planted.
Yeah.
Because if you can build that little building block of trust in that first initial interaction, then they're more likely to wanna engage with you, continue conversation with you, buy from you again, come back to your bar, ask you to be their waiter when you come to the restaurant. So, I love that, that's really a cool point. Um, Tell me about a time in your life or your career when you realized that your reputation was so important. It was important for you to have a good reputation.
So I'm going to talk about LinkedIn primarily
Mm,
because I feel like so I was one of those people who, and I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that are probably in the same boat or maybe in the same boat. I had LinkedIn. I probably had an account for, I'm going to probably say 12, 13 years, but I
uh-huh.
really only started to use it and utilize it in the last two or three. And when you talk about how important it was, I started to realize because somebody told me, you need to. I said, I want to get out there. I want to start to
Mhm.
meet new people. And I want to see what's out there, see what opportunities are there for me. And they said to me, well, you need to post, you need to comment on people's posts, you need to be interactive with people. And I started to notice it very quickly as soon as I started to do that and commenting on other people's posts and writing my own stuff. I started to meet people and have conversation with people, and I saw it very, very quickly. So, and then they saw who I was because they would read my profile, they would see who I was. And
Mhm.
then you mentioned earlier me when I started doing my podcast, I found that people started to see who I was, and they'd look and they'd see on the site, they'd look and see what people are saying about me. So I think it really cultivated and let allow people to see who I was, and that kind of continued
Built your
to
reputation.
help me continue to build for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really good I had the same experience with LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember when I started engaging on LinkedIn, I was terrified. My
Mm-hmm.
very first post, I was sweating, and my first post was actually about social anxiety, about how nervous I was to share something on the platform. And it was one of those things where I was like, "Oh, I knew that I needed to do that in order to build my reputation and start to get myself and my company out there. I had to take that risk and face the discomfort of, it's not comfortable when you put yourself out there, but that putting yourself out there is when you're able to make so many rewarding incredible relationships like the one that you and I have, or like,
Absolutely.
so sometimes I think it's important to realize that in building your reputation, you have to take some risks. You've
Mm-hmm.
got to face some discomfort in doing that and really trying to put yourself out there. But the benefits really outweigh the risks and the discomfort. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a really interesting like dichotomy, like anything of value that you want in life, especially relationships, it's going to not be comfortable. And I think sometimes like I had a really great conversation with a woman about this at a conference, a friend at a conference recently that I was at. And we were talking about how people are so involved in social media and people are having like fewer and fewer like actual in-person, interactions and
Mm-hmm.
that people don't know how or like we were thinking about it, Andrew, and we're like, why is it that like kids these days, they'll sit in the same room, for example, and they'll just text each other while they're sitting right next to each other. Or like, or they defer to text. It's easier to text than it is to pick up the phone or to go visit with someone.
Mm.
And I think it kind of goes back to this thing that there's a level of discomfort. There's a risk involved when you actually physically pick up the phone and call someone and have
Mhm.
a conversation with them. It's riskier to do that. It requires
Mhm.
more of investment of time and effort than it
Mhm.
does to just text someone.
Right.
And it's the same thing like meeting in person. There's a discomfort there, there's a risk there,
Right.
but the richness of the relationships that you build when you actually do invest beyond the texting. And so like when you talk about LinkedIn, I love that you talk about, commenting and creating posts, but where the magic is what you do with those relationships after
Mhm.
you comment and post,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
What do you think about
Absolutely.
that?
I think it's super important. I spoke to somebody a couple of weeks ago. We had a phone chat, just a kind of coffee meet and greet type chat, and I said to her, I said, "Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today, and actually, thank you so much for being willing to do it over the phone." And she said to me, she says, "Oh my God, Andrew," she says, "I'm going to tell you something." She said, "I was totally floored because everybody, she says, I don't mind the Zooms and the Teams and the texting and the emails and stuff like that. But she said, I miss the days when someone
Mhm.
said, I want to pick up the phone and I want to have a conversation with you." So she says, when you messaged me and said, "Hey, are you okay with having it over the phone?" She said to me, she said, "Oh my," she thought to herself, "Oh my God, like absolutely. Like I totally
Mhm.
missed that time when I would pick up the phone and talk to somebody." She was saying that she talks to her mother sometimes, and she could be like texting back with her like 20 minutes, and she says her husband would say to her, like, "Why don't you just pick up the phone and call her, like, instead of like texting for 20 minutes and what do you mean?" And you're writing back like, "What do you mean?" or "What are you trying to say?" or what, instead of just doing that, just pick up the phone, call her, and have the conversation. And she says it probably will go a lot quicker and a lot simpler for you. But like you said, we're in the social media realm, and everybody wants to text and all that stuff. So
Yeah, I love this. This is so great. Like strengthen your reputation by cultivating those relationships. You starting them off and not being afraid on LinkedIn to just start having conversations and then taking them offline on phone calls
right.
is a way to build your reputation and people can see you as someone they can trust. What are some other suggestions you have for people on how they can build their reputation, maybe in their families, in their communities, at work? What are some things that you'd recommend, strategies people can do to really improve that or
Well,
cultivate?
I think it's very important for people to consider or to think about learning, studying, and growing together. I feel like that's so important,
Mm.
and I feel like you grow it. I feel like we were in a community-based environment these days, especially like you mentioned on LinkedIn. And I feel like we're not alone. I feel like we're
Mm.
all together, even though we might be doing one thing. Just you're doing something, I'm doing something, but we're all together in a community, so we grow together.
Mm.
Um, and then I think if you're going to be relatable to anyone, you must show humility and you must show humanity. I really
Ooh.
feel like you need to do that. Um, we must empower humility and humanity as far as I'm concerned. And also when I think about reputation, I think it's important to consider we want to counsel somebody. We don't want to cancel anybody.
Ooh, that's wonderful. Humanity and humility, counsel, don't cancel. That's beautiful. So tell me an example, like how could someone counsel but not cancel someone? What's like an example you can think of how you can actually practice this, for example?
Well, if we're talking in a leadership realm, I would say the best way to do that would be figuring out when someone needs to speak to you, when they want to have a conversation. I think it's important to improve or on our listening skills and determine what type of conversation it's going to be and what that individual
Mm.
needs. So if you're having a conversation with somebody, you need to understand, do they need to do I need to answer them or give them commentary or give them feedback of what they're telling me? Or am I listening what I like to call with pause, where basically you were listening to somebody and waiting for a reaction from them and to see what type of, what are they needing? Because they might just need to vent. And a lot of times people are talking, like you're a public speaker, Nicole. So a lot of times you're talking and you might pause for a couple of seconds to kind of process what you're going to say next. But people might assume or they might think that you're done what you have to say, but you're not. So we
Mm.
just need to pause those few seconds, let everything uh stir in the
Percolate.
pot,
Yeah.
percolate, stir in the pot, and then okay, this is where we, and then think, okay, this is where we at, and then your next question is, okay, well, what do you need? What do you need from me? Do
Mhm.
you need me to give you some feedback? Do you need me to just continue to listen to you? Like you need to kind of understand exactly what that person is needing because they don't always want feedback. They just want sometimes they just need to vent. They just need to let it all out.
Counsel, not cancel. I love that, and you're right, they don't always need feedback. I love to ask the question if I wanna share feedback with someone, I always ask their permission. I don't always, but I try
Mhm.
to ask their permission, or at least remember, like, "Is it okay if I give you some feedback?" Before I just pepper that whatever it is and,
Right.
and ask their permission. I love that counsel, not cancel. And I think
Mhm.
what your example that you shared is like listening and validating, trying to validate wherever that person is in whatever they're feeling, whatever place they are, to just really validate it before you jump to any sort of conclusions or suggestions or recommendations or anything along those lines. Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you.
Very cool. So let's talk about like, reputation. When I think of reputation, this is kind of like how others perceive you, right? Like this
Mhm.
is kind of like uh, the perceptions of others towards you. What do you recommend for people when their reputation may be tarnished for some reason, right? Like we all make mistakes. We all
Mhm.
do. We're all human. I love that you said humanity and humility.
Mhm.
um, we're not immune to that, and I think our mistakes are a lot more amplified on social media because we have social media here now in this world that privacy is much harder, and it's easier for people to see all our wrinkles and flaws and everything. And you see that, like, good people make mistakes all the time. We
Mhm.
all do, and sometimes that happens. So what do you recommend for people? You see this with brands too, they have to do damage control.
Mhm.
If your reputation has been damaged if in some way by a choice that you made in the past that maybe you regret or you wish you would have done differently, what's your advice for people on what they can do to kind of rebuild or repair that reputation for themselves, right? And for other people.
Well, I think you have to remember, like, first of all, nobody's perfect. So things are going to happen.
Mhm.
And I think you have to remember that not everybody is going to like you or they're going or not, and not everybody is going to understand you as the person that you are. They're not going to get who you are. So if you are uh, let's say we've talked about this before, Nicole, if you're a people pleaser, some people don't understand that. They don't get that. And then they assume something about you because you're like that. So I think we have
Mhm.
to remember that not everybody is going to understand us or like us. The other thing I think, again, I talked about humility and being humble. I feel like when you when there's a situation, I think we have to kind of take the time to think back and try to look at the situation and go, okay, maybe I could have done this a little bit differently, or maybe I could have said this instead of this, or maybe I could have done that. I agree with this, one side of this part. I agree with how I handled that, but maybe in this situation, I could have handled it a little bit differently. So I feel like kind of looking at the situation, processing everything that happened, and then trying to figure out a way to kind of resolve it, whether We talked about having a difficult conversation, having those conversations.
Mhm.
And, some people don't like to say that they were wrong. There's a lot of people don't like to say that they're sorry. I have no problem with that. If I feel like I've done something, I will say it. I will come out and I will say, listen, I was wrong for that, and I apologize. A lot of the times, I'm even sometimes I might be saying sorry, and it may not be anything huge, but it makes me feel better to say that
Yeah,
this is I looked at it and this is how I felt. And once I've done it, and they say, "Oh, it's okay, whatever, don't worry about it, Andrew. We're good." Then I feel better. But at least I came out and I said that. So I think just being humble, realizing that you're not always right.
mhm.
Sometimes you're in the wrong, and when we're in the wrong, we need to be humble enough to admit it and come out and say it.
Oh, I love that. So 2 things I love. I love that you said, first of all, that not everybody's gonna get you, and that's okay. You know, it's okay. I mean, there's gonna be people that aren't gonna understand you, and instead of
Mhm.
trying to be everything to everyone and make everyone else like you or be likable, just embrace the fact and lean into the things that are so unique and beautiful about you, and the right people are gonna find you and wanna be,
Mhm.
associated with you, and don't worry about the trolls and the naysayers. I think that's
Right.
beautiful.
Right.
And I love your point too about saying sorry. It makes me think about, like, for example, Boeing, right? They've had some snafus of late with their airplanes, and they've had to do some damage control.
Mhm.
And I remember when the first it's several years ago when they had those plane crashes, multiple plane crashes, and the CEO of Boeing for a while was just really, instead of apologizing, was just really kind of taking this very firm stand that was almost anti-apologetic,
Right.
and then it backfired on him, and this new CEO, after this latest incident came out and just put out a statement that was just like, "I'm so sorry, we're doing everything that we
Mm.
can. We're sorry for the families that have been impacted by this." And immediately when you hear that, it builds trust,
Mhm.
I feel like. It builds so much trust when you can hear someone say they're sorry because it shows that they care
Mhm.
and they're vulnerable, and there's something about being vulnerable
Mhm.
that really helps to cultivate a shared sense of trust between people
Mhm.
and help build your reputation.
I feel like there's a lot of people who don't like to be vulnerable or feel that they can't be vulnerable. And I feel like you can. So I have a friend of mine who works for a company, and her leader, there's about 15 people on her team, and the leader came in every day. They come in and say, "Hello, how's it going? Good
Mhm.
morning." This day they came in, and she said he was just absolutely distraught, not himself. He walked in,
Mm.
everybody said hello, good morning, and he's walking to his office, and he just stopped and he turned around and he said, "Listen, I'm going to be very honest and vulnerable with you guys today. I've had a really rough morning, and I'm not myself. So
Mm.
what I would ask for you guys, I'm just going to go to my office for a half hour, 45 minutes, and I'm going to do some work, and I'm going to replenish and think my thoughts through. And after the half hour, 45 minutes, when I'm ready, if anybody wants to have or needs to have any conversations with me, I will be available to do that after. But I'm just asking if you
Mm.
give me this half hour, 45 minutes." He closed his door, and everybody was like looking at each other, and they went, "Wow." And that day I joke about it with her because, if you watch the Grinch, everybody's heart grew 10 sizes bigger that day because they already admired him. But just because he did that, if he asked them to run through the brick wall of the company, they probably would have. Like, that's just how uh, such a great message and such a great situation were to show, to say, "Hey, if I'm going to show you in a situation how I am, you're going to follow. If I'm not,
Mm, mm.
Myself, you're going to follow. If I'm like, okay, guys, this is what's going to be, it's going to happen, we're going to be okay, this is what we're going to do, da 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 da. We always follow what the leader is doing and how they're what they're saying. So if you're again, I just love when you said vulnerable, because if we are vulnerable and if we get out of the old mentality of we have to be stern, I think
Yeah.
people will you'll see a huge difference in the workplace, by far, in my opinion.
That's a beautiful example. Oh my gosh. I admire that leader. I think what it shows to me is a lot of respect because he could have come into the office and been in a very bad state and not said anything to the team. And maybe they would have approached him and maybe he would have reacted emotionally when they did because he was in a, he was dealing with a lot. But him actually, like, sharing where he was at and setting a boundary and saying, "I need 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with a lot," shows respect both to the team and to himself.
Mhm.
He's saying to the team, "I'm here for you, but I need some time." And to himself, he's saying, "I need this time in order for me to bring my best self."
Yep.
I just think that's a really great point. A lot of times when you think of vulnerability, people might think, "Oh, weakness." This is, people who are of the old school mentality may think when you're being vulnerable, you're just oversharing and you're overly emotional and all that. Vulnerability is showing respect for
Right.
yourself and the
Right.
people around you
Right.
and I think that's such a beautiful example of that. Oh,
Yeah.
it's cool.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think the key there, Nicole, is that he didn't have to tell them that. He could have just walked into his office and
Yeah.
closed his door, but he wanted to bring the vulnerability, but he wanted to also bring the communication aspect there. So instead of him closing his door and everybody assuming a gazillion different scenarios, they knew right away. He communicated what was happening. So when he closed the door, there was no like talking of like, oh, I wonder what happened, or I wonder if this,
Yeah.
or that. There was no assuming, like there was nothing to assume because he nipped it in the bud right then and there.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm, you really illustrated how important it is as leaders that we communicate with our teams regularly,
Yep.
whatever, but how do you find that balance between communicating too much and communicating not enough? I think that's something I know I personally struggle with as a leader is I want to make sure my team is in the know and in the loop on things. And if I am having a bad day, let them know. But I also don't wanna overburden them, right? Like, I don't wanna put my problems, challenges on them,
Right.
right?
Right.
I think as leaders, that's a that I feel like that's a balancing act. Would you agree with that? Or what do you recommend for leaders who struggle with that? Or how do you recommend people kind of find that balance of communicating, but not overly communicating things?
So I think people want to know what's going on. So let's say you're a leader and something's going on. You bring everybody together. You're having a meeting and you say,
Mhm.
"Listen, this is what we're looking at. There are certain things that I can't divulge at the moment, but I'm going to
Yeah,
divulge the things that I can at this time." And you divulge that and you tell them, and then you say the other stuff as things happen. I will
mhm,
continue to communicate with you what's going on as much as I can communicate. And that's
yeah,
all you need to do, because I think if you when you're very secretive and you
mhm,
are a company that has a lot of closed doors meetings, and employees are walking by and always seeing like doors closed and everything, well, of course, again, the mind wanders and the mind is like, oh my god, what's going on, what's happening? But if you communicate it, this is what we're working on, this is what I can tell you, this is what I can tell you, I'm going to be transparent about this, but I'm going to be honest with you, I can't get into any details on this at the moment. And I think you just, again, nip everything in the bud right away, and people will, there's going to be no chitter chatter or wondering, what's going on, because they're going to say, well, they're going to communicate it. They're going to, and as long as you continue to communicate, if you leave it for 6, 8 months and you don't say anything, then it's going to fester. But if you continuously
yeah.
let people know as it goes, I feel like you are It's kind of
Mm,
like it's kind of like, let's say, I'll give you an example, Nicole. It's like if you were to order something from a store, and then and then you say, how long is it going to take to come in? And they're going to say four. They're going to say, oh, about 4 weeks, right? Then the salesperson calls you back, and they're going to say, listen, I just want to let you know that I said it was going to be 4 weeks, but it's going to be a little bit of an extra week. I just wanted to give you an update on that in case you came in a couple of weeks and wondering where it is. I'm just going to want to give you an update. I will give you a further update once the product is in. So you don't have anybody. What the person's not wondering. Well, it said it's gonna be here for 4 weeks, and now I went to the store and it wasn't there. What's going on? What's happening? Right? As long as you
yeah.
communicate that and let them know what's going on. I know for me, anyways, I would like to know. As long as someone tells me what's happening or what's going on, I'm good.
Yeah, I love that. I think that you're what you're suggesting is to have that regular communication,
Yep.
so people feel kind of some safety knowing, okay, I don't know everything, but I know that Nicole or Andrew, they're going to keep me updated because they've been keeping me updated. And that's another great thing about building a reputation,
Right.
making sure that you're regularly communicating what's going on with employees and team
Mm-hmm.
members and family or whoever you're at in
Yep.
whatever communities that you're in.
For sure.
Hmm.
For sure.
Love that. Okay, so I have another question for you about what do you see as the difference between reputation and character, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
reputation is like, kind of your people's perception of you,
Yep.
right? But do you see this like do you see those as two different things? Like what do you see as the differences between them?
I see a difference in it too. So reputation is what we think,
Mhm.
and character qualifies our the qualities of an individual is
Mhm.
what I'm thinking. So no matter where you are, I'd say the moral fiber is that you must match how you were perceived is kind of what I'm kind of thinking
Yeah.
on that. So yeah, so reputation is what you think. The other one, and then character, qualities of what an individual sees.
Mhm. I love that. I think that's a very clear distinction. Do you think it's possible for people to have, like, a really good reputation and really poor character? Do you think they'll ever be found out? Do you know what I mean?
Um, I think it'd be kind of hard, in my
Yeah,
opinion. I think if you have a good, I think the character goes along with the reputation. So if you
yeah.
have, if you're well known, if you talk to somebody and you say, "Oh yeah, oh, I talked with so and so today. Oh wow, they're such a super person. They're so genuine and they're so authentic, and I just love how they are." And you can just see when they're talking on the phone or in front of a
Mhm.
camera or in person, they're the same person no matter what. They never waver from how they are.
Oh,
Where
that's an interesting
if
point.
you if you so I feel like it's kind of hard to do that because you are who you are, right? So you can't
Yeah.
change who you are. Myself, I can't change who I am. And I am who I am. Like I said earlier, like some people are going to like you, some people are not going to like you. Some people are not going to believe that you are who you are or that you're like this all the time. Yeah, you have your good days, you have your bad days, but if you're genuine, you try to be the same type of person all the way through all the time, and I think people recognize that for sure.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, like, it comes through in your consistency in your behavior, people
Hmm.
see. Like,
Yep.
I can trust this person because this is how they show up all the
Yep.
time,
Yep.
and that's
Yep.
something that you can trust. Very
Hmm.
cool.
Hmm.
My gosh, well, this has been such a fun conversation, Andrew.
Sure has.
Oh, do you have any, like, final words of wisdom for our listeners on the value of relationship building and any nuggets that you can share that would help those out there who like maybe there's some listeners, I think, who are newer in their career, for example,
Mhm,
who are
mhm,
just really trying to establish themselves,
mhm.
um, on things they can do to really start to build that relationship at that age and put themselves in a good position for their long-term career goals.
So I feel like there's different types of relationship building. So
Mhm.
there's the relationship building where you're just going to continuously build with them, talk to them, have conversations with them. And then there's those people who you're going to do, if you're talking in a sales aspect, there's those people who you're going to build relationships with. And then eventually you're going to say, okay, I'm going to approach them with some things that I can offer them. So you kind of know when it's that time to approach them,
Yeah.
but not everybody's going to be like that you meet. So there's some people that you just know, like, okay, this is how it's going to be, and that's okay. And then there's those people who you're going to eventually say, okay, you know what, hey, I have something for you. I'd like to, an idea that I'd like to discuss with you and get your thoughts on it. I think it
Mm.
comes to that time where, and then see how that goes. But you've already built that reputation, the rapport with them. So they're going to be willing to listen to you, whether they decide that they want to continue doing or they want to work with you or not. That's another story. But they're at least going to be willing to hear you out and listen. And then maybe down the road, if they say no, that's okay. Then and maybe down the road they might change their mind. So, but I think when we build a reputation, we can't be afraid to say the word no and hear the word no.
Mm.
I feel it's very important to understand the two, because if we're afraid of any of the other things, our reputation could be compromised.
That's a really good point. I had a dear mentor who once told me, I'll never forget it. Fierce business owner, female owned, she woman owned business, um, and highly successful. I worked for her for many years, and I remember we were trying to decide about a project, and we're trying to figure out a problem about this project. And I was like, maybe we should ask the client, X, Y, Z.
Mm,
And we were trying to decide if we should. I don't remember the specifics. I don't remember the specifics of the problem, but I remember what she told me. She said, Nicole, all they can do is say no. And the way that she said it was just almost so light and fluffy. Like,
right.
what's the worst that can happen? They say no. There's no consequence really so basically what I learned from her in that, and I think that was one of the mantras that clearly got her to where she was, is it's like, I'm going to try. I'm going to put myself out there. And the worst that can happen is they're going to say no. Like, like there's not really like anything if you think about worst case scenario. And I think for people who are new in their career, I think you're absolutely right. Like, don't be afraid to ask and hear that no, because you're going to hear it. But the yes that you hear can get you to a much better place than if you just hide behind and are afraid to
Yep.
ask.
Yep.
And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about like any relationship that you have, if you feel discomfort when you're stretching yourself, there's a lot of growth and good things on the other side of that discomfort. And that if you're not pushing yourself to feel the discomfort of, reaching out and asking somebody something, or trying to build a new relationship with someone, you're
Absolutely.
missing out on the rewards of what the
Mhm.
richness that can bring to your
Yep.
life.
Yep.
So that's cool. Oh, I
Mhm.
love that, Andrew. We should have a part two. I'm
We
in the
should.
middle of trying to figure out what I'm doing next with my podcast and all this stuff. You know all about that. And I'm like, oh, what do I do? But when we do part two, it'll be on my new show, and
Absolutely.
I would love to have you back. This has been
I
such a joy.
I would love
Mhm.
to come back for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. And thanks for enlightening us all with all these wonderful ways that we can help to build our reputation. It's fantastic. So thanks.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
And stay on so we can chat after I'm
Sure.
done. Okay.